You made it! Well done! I'm going to assume that if you're here, you have already seen part 1 of this video. So welcome to part 2 of the Son of a Witch book club. We are just over halfway through this thing, and there are still many things to go that I am quite excited to share with you. But before we do that, I just wanted to say a quick hello from my car, just because my house is chaos at the moment. So I've popped out to try and find a little bit of calm, but I've also brought a mug of tea with me. I'm in my Earl Grey era, and this is a mug that my friend Jess bought me for Christmas because I've been banging on about making this channel for so long. So look, it says Amy's Annotations. Basically, this channel is going to be all about musicals, books, TV shows, movies. Sometimes they might be sort of book club style videos like this one. Sometimes they might be a little bit more video essay adjacent. I am a content creator over on Instagram and TikTok. That is my job, but making long form content like this has been like a dream of mine for so long, and I'm finally trying my hand at it. So if you like these kinds of videos, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe, and let me know in the comments if there's any particular topics you'd like to see me cover, because I will take all of that into account, although I have planned my first two videos already, I think. Thank you for sticking with me through this absolutely insane book and for coming over to the new channel. Please remember to give this video a like if you enjoy it, because particularly on a new channel that makes all the difference in the world. Let me just recap real quick. To summarise, Lear ran away from the army after murdering hundreds of people and went back to the castle where he grew up. A swan princess turned up having been attacked, and right before she died, her last words were explaining to Lear that she was on the way to this conference of birds where they were trying to piece together this big mystery about the danger that Oz is facing. There's a lot of political tension, people are getting their faces scraped off, there's this new emperor who seems to be making things worse, etc, etc. So Lear grabbed his probably mum's broom and flew off to find the conference in her place, but he got knocked off his broom on the way by dragons. Presumably it's after this big fall that he was found by Otzi and brought back to the monastery for the nuns to nurse him back to health. Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary were shipped off to try and figure out who's been scraping everyone's faces off, and they ended up meeting Princess Nastoya, the leader of the Scrow tribe, who has been not so patiently waiting for Lear to come back and help her shift back into an elephant so she can die in peace. Problem is, Lear's unconscious, and a very quiet quadling girl called Candle has been playing her made-up instrument to try and bring him back to life. But when that didn't work, she tried to cuddle him back to life instead. Yes, he is still unconscious. No, it was not actually a cuddle, but I'm not 10 minutes into this video yet, and I can't have this channel demonetized before I've even started. Are you following? Good. By the time the Maunts come back from their mission, both Candle and Lear have mysteriously disappeared.
That's what you missed on.
The first part jumped about a bit in terms of timeline. It was quite confusing, so I hope you kept up. Luckily, this second bit I don't think does that. It's all linear, I'm pretty sure. Just as in the first video, we're covering some really sensitive topics here, so viewer discretion is advised. And with all that being said, let's get moving. Lear wakes up slowly. You can tell he's not unconscious anymore because he's got an outfit on instead of his bandages. The book says that he'd had every intention to die, but the music had forbidden it. His memories are quite confused from the fall. He remembers feeling panicked about the girl by the burning bridge. You know, the child you just murdered? Yeah, you should feel panicked about that, actually. He remembers feeling disgust at what Shell had been doing. What, you mean drugging and sexually assaulting prisoners? Yeah, you should feel disgusted about that, actually. But the feelings are quite muted, almost like they're far away or they're not quite real. But once he wakes up fully, he feels really intense pain and grief. He's really upset to still be alive. Candle, who doesn't need the wimple anymore because we're not in the monastery anymore, introduces herself in Qua'ati, and Lear can actually understand her because of his time spent in Koya. So that's nice, and it must be really nice for her to finally have someone around who understands her properly. She brings him water and nuts and apples, which apparently gave him a stentorian diarrhea at first, but cleaned him out and started him up again. Careful, Lear. You know what happened to your dad after he had diarrhea? He improves slowly but steadily. After a while, apparently he's able to get up and piss in a pail. For an author, he just has such a way with words, doesn't he? What is the fascination with wee and poo? I have to ask. And then gradually he starts to pay a bit more attention to his surroundings. Basically, Mother Yakel, who is supposedly so old she can hardly even hold her own head up, somehow managed to drag Lear's body onto a laundry cart with Candle's help and gave directions to bring him here, to a little cluster of abandoned buildings surrounded by dense forest. Apparently she told Candle that she needed to help hide him or people would come after him. Candle thinks it used to be a farm maybe, or somewhere that makes cider because of the apple trees in the orchard, and there are loads of barrels in the shed, but that it was then fitted out for industry with some machinery that she can't really identify. The machinery looks like it's been hacked at by sledgehammers, but she's got absolutely no idea what it's meant to do. She goes out every morning in search of food, and one day she actually brings back a hen to lay eggs for them so they can start to be a little bit more self-sufficient. Lear sleeps for most of the day and then basically just lies awake next to Candle while she sleeps at night. He asks why she rescued him, but she doesn't seem to understand the word rescue, as if she hasn't just been using words like machinery and sledgehammer with no issue. Gregory really seems to pick and choose. Candle seems either like mute or incapable of communicating with Lear when it helps Gregory's storyline, or when he's trying to paint her out to be like silly or naive, but then other times there seems to be no communication barrier whatsoever. I can't really work out why that would be, apart from just lazy writing, but if anyone has any theories, I would actually love to hear them because I don't get it. Lear actually grows to be a bit suspicious of Candle when he realises that so many of his memories now include this faint music, like when the Scarecrow asked if the rain sounds like a Domingan, or the music in the background of South Stairs. There are so many examples like that. He's worried that his memories might be like fake and implanted by her, and then she's brought him away to this really isolated area so that he can't figure out the truth. He wonders if there even are dragons, or an emperor, or a burning bridge, or if Kiamo coexists, or Elphaba's broom, or even Elphaba while we're at it. Surely he's not about to pull the classic English GCSE and it was all just a dream, is he? Actually, I wouldn't even be surprised at this rate. I might even be relieved. Anyway, he kind of puts that theory to bed because he can speak Qua'ati, which he knows he picked up from his time in the army, and he doesn't think she would have been able to teach him a whole new language. Although, if he's literally doubting everything, what makes him think the army thing's real? But anyway, that's how he convinces himself. The first evening that Lear feels well enough to get out of bed, the pair of them drag their chairs to the door and they watch the stars come out. Lear's feeling maybe a little bit of a romantic spark, and he asks Candle to tell him all about herself. Remember, from his end, he has basically just met this girl. She lights a candle and pulls a bottle of wine out of nowhere, which Mother Yakel apparently gave to her. Of course she did. They sit with their legs crossed over one another, and she tells him all about her upbringing, and it sounds like a really nice, intimate moment, until we find out that Lear can hardly concentrate because the whole time she's been talking, he's been listening out for clues, secretly hoping that he's actually been unconscious for years, and she is the burning baby, the one he saw being thrown into the river in Bengda, you know, when he killed all those people. And maybe I'm overthinking this, but I just think, considering the romantic connotations going on here, the fact that he's desperately hoping that she's a baby he once saw, I just think that's really weird. Anyway, that's not the case. It's not particularly relevant to this story, but just as a quick throwback to book 1, she says that the town she grew up in was visited by Unionist missionaries a few generations ago. So I'm assuming this was Frex, Elphaba's father, because she's from the same town as Turtleheart, but I don't think there's any relation from what I can gather. She tells him that the Domingan was a gift from her uncle, but she won't answer any more questions about the instrument or her uncle. Sounds suspicious to me. But she does say that lots of quadlings have special talents and skills, and that hers seems to be music, and they can also all see things, not necessarily the past or the future, but the present. Candle then asks what happened to Lear's broom, which is a bit of a weird question because he's never mentioned it to her, but it doesn't seem to raise any red flags for him, so I'm assuming he did, but just not that we've seen. But he thinks it must have either fallen to the ground when he did or been stolen by the dragons. He looks around the barn and tries to identify that piece of machinery that Candle couldn't. He thinks it might be an old printing press. He thinks it's maybe a bit suspicious that an old printing press would be out here in an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and that, combined with all the sledgehammer marks and the fact that it's been near on destroyed, makes him think that maybe it's been used to print some seditious tracks, which sounds like something a rapper would say to describe their music. Candle and Lear decide together to name this place apple press farm. This evening has definitely brought them closer together, and when Candle gets into bed that night, Lear snuggles right up to her while she sleeps. And then he basically has to talk himself down by reminding himself that he might have something contagious and it wouldn't be fair to give it to her considering she's just saved his life. I'm going to read from the book for a moment. That's when you know it's about to get weird, isn't it? It says, when it seemed that the sweet, lettucey smell of her breathing, the roll of her breast in the moonlight was too much to bear, that he would sink his mouth upon it, he turned onto his side.
Sucked her tits or whatever.
How what?
Like, licked her tit or whatever.
And then, I actually can't believe I'm saying this, he thinks about the burning bridge and all the people he murdered to cool himself off. No, I'm sorry, that is just not okay. This boy needs investigating. The next morning, while Candle is out looking for food again, Lear goes back to the printing press to try and gather some clues. There's nothing on the press itself, but when he looks into the hearth of the fire, he does find some burned scraps of a broadsheet. Piecing things together, it seems to be an anti-religious paper, specifically talking about this figure called the Apostle, who apparently has no special skills and no real connection to the unnamed god. He thinks it must just be atheists or an opposing religion trying to poke holes in unionism, and that maybe it convinced some people to join some sort of resistance against this Apostle character, whoever he is. He doesn't give it much more thought because Candle then walks in with a new pet goat. She confesses to sneaking into neighbouring farms, lulling everyone to sleep with her Dominican, and then stealing whatever she wants. She asks if Lear knows anything about milking goats, and Lear says, well, I learned to fly a broom, I can probably learn to milk a goat, which is pretty good logic because I reckon I could probably learn to milk a goat, but I don't think I could learn to fly a broom. That one's definitely harder on the scale of difficulty. Can you imagine as an adult trying to figure out if you can ride a broom? Like just standing there with it on the floor between your legs. Surely someone at some point has done that, and it's giving me secondhand embarrassment just thinking about it. A little bit more time passes and we're heading into winter now, so the temperature drops. So Candle asks Lear to go out and get some firewood so they can start to build up a bit of a stash, which he does. The two of them actually get on really well together. They have a few inside jokes, and it's really nice to see Lear with a friend after like following him for so long and him just being so lonely for most of his life. It's just nice. Until you remember the crimes that they've both committed, then it really ruins it actually. There's this really weird bit where Candle starts playing the Dominican and the goat starts singing along with her. I think it is just a normal goat as well, not even a capital G goat. Apparently it's an alto, and Maguire writes that its voice is rather huskier than would work for a paying audience. Okay, there's no need to be rude. Lear asks her the question we're all thinking. Hey, what's up with the singing goat? And she says it's got nothing to do with her. It's literally just the Dominican, obviously. One day, Candle says they've been at Apple Press Farm for a month now, and it's time for Lear to decide whether he's gonna stick it out there for the winter or whether he wants to leave and she needs to go back to the monastery or something. He asks why he would leave, but she asks why he would stay. He says he owes it to her, but she says he doesn't owe her anything, but she does want him to make up her mind so she can prepare for winter properly. She's got to make sure her Gavin and Stacey Christmas special DVD is in the right place, you know?
It's on, Gavin!
Basically, there's a lot of back and forth, but ultimately, Candle encourages Lear to finish the journey he started and try to find that conference of birds. Apparently, they are only a few days away on foot, and Lear obviously doesn't have his broom anymore or a driving license, so foot is kind of the only option. Candle says that she basically wants him to go and tick that off and get it out of his system, and then decide if he wants to stay with Candle or go off on his own. Lear thinks the Dominican's falling off. Lear thinks he loves Candle, but he's not really sure in what way. Whether it's romantic or platonic or just because she saved his life, maybe it's just gratitude, or maybe all of the above. He can't really figure it out, but he assumes that that's just because he's never experienced love in any form, really, so he doesn't know what to do with all the feelings. Before Lear leaves, he kissed her fondly for the first time and tells her that he admires her more than anyone he's ever met. He asks if they're a couple, and she says that quadlings don't really traditionally do couples in the same way, but that they have a mutual understanding that they have feelings for one another. So he leaves her, waiting for his return, and heads into the woods. At this point, Lear is about 24 years old and he's a lot physically weaker than he ever has been before on account of his injuries. The book says that because of his age, he's now developed a bit more of an awareness between being carefree and careless, as in like he's more aware of risks, so he's being a bit more careful where he steps and things like that. Reading between the lines though, I feel like maybe that has less to do with his age and more to do with the fact that he feels like he actually has some independence for the first time in his life and a bit of control over what he does. And maybe it's giving him a little bit more purpose, something to live for. As Lear keeps walking, the landscape gets more and more hilly until eventually he's surrounded by mountains. He doesn't know exactly where the conference is happening or even if he's already missed it, so he sort of wanders round and just hopes he'll stumble across it. Conveniently, he does exactly that. He spots 70 or 80 birds of loads of different species. They're watching him and waiting silently. He approaches them really slowly so they don't scatter, but it seems like they've actually been expecting his arrival. A cliff eagle greets Lear and introduces himself as the leader of the assembly. His name is General Kynot and he thanks Lear for coming. Lear delivers the sad news of what happened to the Swan Princess and that he'd buried her and had come in her place. The swans are understandably very upset, but they grieve quietly so as not to disrupt the plot. It also says that this place is crawling with nits. Not relevant, just a detail I thought you might like to hear. Sorry if you're itchy. General Kynot tells Lear that they've gathered to discuss the threat in the skies, so we now know that he probably means the dragons. The conference is kind of over now, but they've been cornered, so they're too scared to leave. He explains that the Emperor's army of dragons have completely disrupted air travel, and they've displaced both birds and birds. They're terrorizing the birds, and apparently their living conditions have become absolutely intolerable. They're bullying them into not flying basically, so stripping them of their right to flight and migration. They need help fast, and they're hoping that Lear might be the one to help them. But he says that the only reason he came was to tell them about the princess's death, because that is what Elphaba would have done, but he can't actually help them anymore. Now, usually birds keep their distance from humans because of their habit of shooting them down, but because Lear actually has experience on a broom, General Kynot wants his input. He says that Lear has powers which are unique among all the other humans that they've met. Lear insists it's the broom with the powers and that he has nothing to do with it, but Kynot says the wing doesn't work separately from the feather, Lear. They work in tandem. Interesting. General Kynot repeatedly asks Lear to help them and he repeatedly tells them no. But then he does ask if they can keep an eye out for Nor. That is not how favours work, Lear. Stop being so selfish. In response to that, Kynot calls him a cretin, which seems fair enough. More birds are being killed off every single day and they can't even fly anymore without being scared for their lives. So they're definitely not going to try and help him if he won't even try and help them. And you know what? About time that Lear actually saw some consequences for his actions, not that this even scratches the surface. A little wren called Dozy jumps in and tells Lear to get a grip. I love Dozy, she's a bit of an icon. She tells him that the dragons are also responsible for the face scraping situation, so they're dangerous to humans too, and it's literally within his best interests to stop them. Lear says it's really sad and everything that those Maunts died, but like he's not a Maunt, so it's literally not his problem.
I'm sorry to hear that your grandma passed away. I actually am like, obviously I'm gonna be upset about that, yeah.
This man has a serious case of individualism. He's the type of person to say that going to someone else's birthday party is a waste of his time. Dozy gives him the shit he deserves, and Lear gives it, well, maybe I deserve to be attacked by dragons. It's like when you're arguing with a toxic person and bringing up perfectly valid points and they hit you with, well, maybe I'm just the worst person ever. Someone get this man some therapy. Dozy says, you know what? Maybe he did deserve to be attacked, but that's giving the dragons a lot of credit to be able to figure out who to attack based on their morals, and that they're literally just doing whatever the Emperor tells them to do. The Emperor is like the big bad in all of this. He's Bowser. And he's trying to stir up trouble between all of the different tribes and make them hate each other so they can't band together against him. Lear's final take on the matter is that if nothing else, he can't help them because he doesn't have his broom. So General Kynot suggests that maybe he should go and find the dragons and get the broom back. Lear says it's too dangerous, but Dozy says she can tell he's gonna try. That's my optimistic queen. She thinks he'll do it for selfish reasons because he wants to find Nor, but ultimately she doesn't care as long as he gets the job done. This whole time, more and more birds have been joining them, and now there are several hundred. Lear walks back to Apple Press Farm, travelling mostly by night in the hopes that the dragons won't be able to see him. He arrives just before dawn and he hears a donkey and a cockerel, so he assumes that Candle is still stealing things from nearby farms. As he gets closer, he sees her standing in the doorway. She could tell that he was nearby because of her magic power of seeing the present, so she's not like shocked or surprised when she hears someone coming. And while he's been gone, she's really cleaned the place up. There are flowers in pots and herbs drying on strings. She's made him some food so he eats, and then she says he should rest. She takes him into the bedroom, takes his shirt off, cleans him with a wet cloth, and then puts her hand on his chest and says, "Later." Which feels very presumptuous considering they've literally only kissed once. But then again, we do know that Candle kind of has a bit of another side to her, so maybe I shouldn't be shocked. He falls into a really deep sleep, and when he wakes up, Candle is out in the garden working. So he goes out to help her and he tells her she's doing a great job. She says that she's had great reason to build a home with Lear coming back and one on the way. Lear asks if they're expecting company, and Candle replies, "You could put it suchly. Now is not the time for talking in riddles, Candle." Lear's spiraling. He thinks she's not old enough to be pregnant because she is, and I quote, "hardly a woman." Well, why were you getting so hot and bothered over her lettucey breath then if she's literally a child? You absolute creep. Candle assures him that she is old enough because she's pregnant. See, she's got the world's tiniest baby bump now and everything. Lear's really confused because he's only been gone a few weeks and they've never slept together, obviously, so he's not worried about that. He thinks she must have just worked really quickly in charming a local boy while he was still recovering from his injuries, but she tells him that there is no other man. Lear is very sure it's not by him, and he says that he's not stupid about how a girl becomes pregnant and that he won't abandon her, but he also won't be lied to. He's absolutely adamant that he's not the father, and he's not backing down about that. He kept his distance, and I quote, "I never buried myself in your trove," he says. He knows he has thought about it quite extensively before, but thinking about it can't create a baby. He hasn't had any formal sex education, but he does know that much. Candle tells him that actually he did, and explains that she raped him while he was unconscious, and somehow Lear still comes out the bad guy in that conversation. He seems like the bad guy. Are we supposed to think he's the bad guy? I mean, he is for some things, but not for that. They take some time apart and they both crack on with different jobs. Got to get the house ready for a baby now, after all. But by dinner time, they reconvene and Candle tries to convince him that this is a good thing. He changes the subject and tells her about the Conference of Birds and the fact that he wants to go and find the dragons and get back his broom. Candle tells him she's heard that dragons have attacked Koya, the part of Quadling country where Lear was stationed when he was in the army. Apparently there had been a revolt against the Emerald City Home Guard by the Quadling people over taxes, and there had been lots of blood shed on both sides. I'm not sure how Candle is supposed to figure this out, considering she's been on her own abandoned farm apart from a cockerel and a goat. But let's ignore that plot hole. Lear hopes that Commander Cherrystone is among the dead, and he doesn't seem too worried about any of the soldiers he literally spent years of his life with. But he does think a little bit about how many deaths there have been, both by his hand and by others, in the name of the Emperor, and how the Emperor kind of seems to be the only person who's actually benefiting. Candle tells him that he's not on death's door anymore, and he actually needs to start showing up for the people he's promised to help. Princess Nastoya and the birds and Nor and even himself. Lear's just gutted that he lost his virginity and he can't even remember it. Candle runs away to be sick in private, and Lear does the best he can to prepare the house for his departure because he's off again and it might be a little while. He tells Candle that he will stay with her and with the child regardless of whether it's his baby or not. So we're back in the Emerald City. It's been years since Lear was last here and it's undergone a real transformation. Everything's been bleached, the graffiti's all gone, there are really well-maintained bushes and fountains everywhere. It all seems very grand and showy, and all the people seem to be in such a hurry. The cafes are thriving and the piazzas and the museums are so busy, full with tourists tourists visiting the capital of Oz. This is much closer to the Emerald City that we see in the musical, or even in The Wizard of Oz actually. Lear tries his best to keep a low profile, and luckily he remembers his way around the Emerald City pretty well, so he heads straight for Lord Chuffrey's house to find Glinda. She's retired from public life, but he assumes she'll still have some contact in the army or something that might be able to help him. But when he arrives at Glinda's house, the houseboy tells him that she's not at home. She's actually gone to her country house to mourn the death of her husband. Lord Chuffrey has apparently recently died, just after making a very sizable donation to the Emperor. Interesting. Right, so Glinda's not going to be any help, but Lear doesn't know anyone else in the Emerald City. So he wanders around for a bit and then realises he's headed in the direction of the place he spent most of his time when he lived here, the base of the Emerald City Home Guard. He passes some soldiers playing with some children, but just keeps walking towards the gate until one of the soldiers taps him on the shoulder. Lear doesn't recognise him, but he knows who Lear is immediately, and asks what did he do to deserve early retirement. Apparently the rest of the soldiers' contracts have all been extended indefinitely with no right to argue. Lear eventually recognises the man as Trism von Cavalish, the soldier who had given him advice to get into the army, and then they'd bumped into each other in the pub the night before Lear was shipped out. Lear remembers that he'd heard rumours that this Trism guy was working in dragon husbandry, and while it hadn't really meant much to him at the time, suddenly he found that very interesting. Lear sort of dodges all of Trism's questions, but Trism guesses that he's a deserter. Lear doesn't deny it and warns him that he'll get in trouble if he gets caught speaking to a deserter, but Trism says that sounds like fun, and he asks if Lear's secretly spying for their enemies. Lear replies saying he doesn't know who their enemies are, and he never has, even when he was working for them, but Trism says that if he's a deserter, then he's one of them, but he doesn't seem to mind. He tells Lear to stay hidden, but close by. He's allowed out on leave tonight, so he'll come and find him and they can go for a drink. He says to Lear, "Don't forget me," and then grips his collar and says, "I haven't forgotten you." So later that evening, they go to the pub together. It's called the Cherry and Cucumber. Pink goes good with green. There's live music and it's quite busy, so they're able to chat freely without worrying about being overheard. Trism doesn't bother asking Lear any questions, assuming he wouldn't want to answer them anyway, but he chats away about life in the military as if they were best friends, and he fills him on loads of the social gossip. Lear asks if Commander Cherrystone had been killed in the Koya revolts. Way to bring down the mood. But Trism doesn't know. He's surprised that Lear remembers his role in Special Forces husbandry, but when he tries to press for more information, Trism says that his role has developed a bit, but he doesn't like to talk about work when he's out and about. The singer starts a new song and she asks the band for the key of E, as in E for Elphaba. And then she starts to rant about the Emperor Apostle and the Elphaba Lives graffiti, which is apparently still there, even though most of the Emerald City has been really cleaned up. She's very old and she's not making much sense, and it's not really clear whose side she's even on, but the mention of his probably mum has understandably really shaken Lear up. When the song has started and the crowd are singing along, the pair manage to sneak out unnoticed. Trism grabs Lear's hand and squeezes it, and Lear squeezes back. He actually feels almost a sense of closure from hearing Elphaba's name out in the open. To hear other people talking about her felt a little bit like attending her wake. They walk around the rainy back streets together. Trism tells Lear it's weird that the performer seemed so against the Emperor Apostle, who has been appointed to the throne by the unnamed god, and people quite like him overall. Trism says that he's actually met him, and then he remembers that he was actually with Lear the first time he ever met him. It was the night before he'd shipped out. He'd been really drunk and waiting for a cab. The pieces kind of start to fall into place for Lear, and he realises that the Emperor is actually Shell, as in slimy Shell. Shell, who also said he doesn't believe in any religion, and the whole time had been saying that the unnamed god had appointed him emperor. Trism's quite confused that Lear's so shocked, because apparently the identity of the emperor is no secret, everyone knows it. But Lear tells Trism that all he's ever heard anyone talk about is the emperor's virtue, and Shell is far from virtuous. He tells Trism about Shell using the extract of poppy flower to opiate the young prisoners and fuck them silly. Again, his words, not mine. But Trism seems quite unfazed and optimistic and tells Lear that everyone can change. Lear's not convinced at all and asks, Are we so desperate that we need the likes of him? Trism asks how desperate anyone is, and apparently his voice had gotten lower, intimate. He says, are any of us so desperate that we might, say, attack an unnamed settlement at night and burn it into the river? Lear is shocked and he doesn't know what to say, but Trism reaches out and pins his arms behind his back, calling him a shitty little creep. Finally, someone holding Lear accountable. But that is not where I thought this was going. Lear asks if this is a one-person vendetta or if the whole army is against him, but Trism ignores his questions and says he's going to beat his head in and shove his carcass in the river. Lear can't even shout out for help because the police would obviously side with Trism. He repeatedly asks why it matters so much to Trism, who has his knees on Lear's chest now, and he does pause to answer him. He explains that because of that attack, the Quadlings struck out at Cherrystone's troops, and the Emperor deployed his weapon, the dragons, against the natives. Trism's been working really closely with the dragons, and he was told they were just for show, for like big military parades. But because of Lear's actions that day, Trism has been forced to deploy the dragons with instructions to kill. Once the military higher-ups had seen what the dragons were capable of, they wanted to use them more and more. And now Trism's whole life's work is perfecting the killing skills of these terrifying monsters. Lear is shocked, obviously, at this sudden outburst and tells Trism that he can kill him, but can he just hear him out first? He explains that it was the Emperor who told Cherrystone to launch an attack on the Bengdani people. He knew it would cause trouble, and he was obviously looking for an excuse to send the dragons out. Lear had just been doing his commander's bidding, just like Trism. I mean, fair enough, sort of, but could you maybe take some accountability for the hundreds of people you've killed, maybe? Trism is sobbing now, and he's still got his knees on Lear's chest, so his snot is like falling out of his nose onto Lear's face. Stunning. He says he's only doing the Emperor's bidding, but now there are hundreds dead and even more hundreds living in terror because of his actions. He realises that him and Lear are actually in the same boat, although he seems to actually feel bad about it, unlike Lear. They reach a bit of a mutual understanding, and Trism finally stands up, allowing Lear to move. They continue to walk around the alleyways together, and Trism explains a little bit more about his role now that he's calmed down. He is the Chief Dragon Master. He's not the governor of the dragon stables, so he has no real say in how it's run or anything like that, but he's the one who trained them and the one they all listen to. He's been working with them for the longest out of everyone. He knew a pack of dragons had returned from the west with a broom and a cape, but he didn't know where they'd gotten them from. He also knew about the scraping of the missionary Maunt's faces and that there had been quite a few others too. He says the dragons scrape the faces off with their super sharp claws, and they've been trained by Trism to only go after the young. The theory is that when people go down in their youth, in their prime, it's more alarming. So basically the dragon said Lear was too old to bother with. Trism carries on explaining what he knows about the Emperor's plans. He's taken issue with the old Monasteries because apparently some of the superiors are questioning his spiritual authority. The Monasteries are traditionally independent of the government, and that doesn't suit the Emperor's agenda either. But Trism says he doesn't really know the whole story. I think basically he was quite happy to just blame Lear for the whole dragon thing, but now he's maybe starting to realise that the Emperor, Slimy Shell, is the real villain here. Lear explains his theory that the dragon attacks are also dividing the tribes of the Vinkus so they don't unite together against the Emperor. It actually just gets worse. Trism tells Lear that the scraped faces have been collected, cured and stored, and that they're ready to be brought out at the next national holiday parade to make a point. He also says there are several dozen dragons in total, and that they're all being fed on the corpses of freshly killed humans. The bodies are apparently being imported from a killing chamber in South Stairs thanks to the side business of Chide, the undermayor. That's where he's getting all his bling. He's either stealing it from the victims or accepting it as payment. Trism feels completely trapped into being complicit and responsible for these killing machines, and it's eating him up, no pun intended. Their conversation turns back to the Emperor, and Trism is still actually quite empathetic. He theorises that Shell was probably quite worried after what happened with his sisters, who are obviously Elphaba and Nastoya. Yeah, he was maybe worried that he would become like a target, so he turned to the unnamed god to tell him what to do. He asks Lear if he was part of such a wicked family, wouldn't he do the same? Obviously, he has no idea that Lear is literally part of the same family. Shell apparently sees it as his destiny, and he's been telling people that even his name is a metaphor for him being empty and ready to become a shell filled with the spirit of the unnamed god. Okay. Apparently, Shell had shown Trism a page from the Grimoire, which was all about dragons, so that's what gave him the idea. But Lear kind of just wondered how on earth Shell had managed to get the Grimoire, or at least a page of it. But obviously, he doesn't want to let on to Trism that he has any sort of interest in Elphaba's Book of Magic Spells, so he doesn't say anything. Trism is absolutely convinced that Shell is completely genuine. And when Lear tries to remind him of the heinous acts that the Emperor had forced him into, he says that wasn't Shell, that was the unnamed god through Shell. Lear says he thought the whole point in the unnamed god was that he was unnamed and it's not just another name for Shell Throp. Sick burn. He asks if Trism could maybe ask to transfer roles, but apparently it's been made very clear that that is not possible because he is the only person with such in-depth knowledge of the dragons. Lear suggests that maybe he should quit, but Trism says that it actually wouldn't make him feel any better because they would ultimately figure out a way to replace him and the dragons would still be doing a lot of damage thanks to his training. He also has a family and they would be mortified if he deserted and they might even be punished. Lear is absolutely devastated to hear Trism talking about his family, and he compares it to the feeling of falling from the height of the dragons. Trism, I think, sees his face drop and clarifies that he means his parents and his older brother. And that answer seems to stop Lear from completely crashing out. Why were you so worried about the idea of Trism having a wife and kids, Lear? They walk past some Elphaba lives graffiti and Lear is suddenly fuming. Trism asks why he cares so much, so Lear quickly changes the subject, saying maybe it's Trism's destiny to kill the dragons. Trism tells him he's insane, but Lear says, well, you tried to kill me earlier and the dragons have done way worse than I have. Trism kind of actually likes the idea, but he's worried about the consequences that something like that might have on his family. So then Lear suggests that he actually does it and he leaves a note to say he's kidnapped Trism. He hasn't got any next of kin to worry about. Trism then realizes it's 11:30 and he needs to be back on the base by midnight, so they hurry back. And while they're walking, Trism explains how to handle a dragon. They're skittish and inbred, apparently, so it's difficult. You have to be completely still, like a rag doll, until the animal relaxes and its breathing gets slower. Then he mounts them with the crook of his knees around their wings and his arms wrapped around their neck. This apparently makes their ears fill with blood and stand up. It's arousal, basically. Oh, obviously, it's arousal, basically. Why would it be anything else? Nothing weird. He says he just has to hum the shape of a task into their ear and they'll do anything. Lear says, but he didn't tell them to attack him and to steal his broom. And Trism says no, he didn't, and that's quite worrying. They reach the gates of the army base and the guard is tired and distracted and he basically just waves them through. It looks like he's reading something similar to the apostle paper from Apple Press Farm. They walk straight towards the basilica because the dragon stable is underneath. Trism tells Lear that a while back a cleaner had accidentally left a bucket of cleaning chemicals lying around and a dragon had drunk them and then died in its sleep. They enter the underground stables and Lear cannot even bring himself to look at the dragons, presumably because of the trauma from the attack, but he can smell, once again, Gregory Maguire's words, not mine, their semen sweet skin. Why? It's just so unnecessary. Trism gets some cleaning products out of a cupboard and pours them all into a bucket, but the first dragon turns its nose up at it, and Trism says they are fast learners, so this might be harder than they originally thought. He thinks the dragons might be able to remember what had happened to their friend, and that maybe now they've learned not to drink the cleaning products. So they need to disguise the smell somehow, and they need to work fast. So they go down to the food cellar and haul the dragon food up. It's bundled up in old newspaper and tied up with string so they don't have to look at the meat too closely, but Lear is so aware that he's carrying fresh human meat and he's retching, but Trism tells him to get it together. If he vomits, the dragons will smell that and they will be completely put off their food, so then they'd have no chance of poisoning them. Lear wants to see the dragons and remember their attack to give him the strength it takes to kill them and focus on that instead of the bodies he's carrying. The dragons eat their dinner without a second thought. And once they're finished, Lear finally allows himself to look. He turns and locks eyes with the dragon closest to him, immediately recognizing it as the dragon from the attack. And it's clear the dragon recognizes him as well. It starts to kick off, roaring loudly. So Trism grabs Lear by the shoulders and says, "Let's get out of here." He thinks they know they're dying, and at least one of them knows why. So Trism and Lear run back up the stairs, and there's no sign of anyone being alarmed just yet. As they reach the door of the basilica, Lear remembers his broom and he says, well, he's not leaving without it, not after all that. Trism opens a door off the corridor and tells Lear to wait there because inside is the stuff of nightmares, but Lear follows him anyway. They enter a shed which reeks with the juice of pickling agents and tanning acids. Trism knows exactly where the broom is, so he heads straight to the back and starts struggling with a tricky lock. Lear tries to follow him, but it's quite dark in there, and he accidentally trips over a pile of wooden hoops which all clatter to the ground and make a really loud noise, so he freezes. Lear can hear the dragons snorting and flapping their wings, and he can also hear the moment that Trism manages to break the lock. The book says he looked up in something like love at the sight of Trism holding the cape over one arm and the broom in the other. Lear's eyes adjust to the darkness, and he notices 12 faces staring back at him, but they're not attached to bodies. The scraped faces are strung with cord to those wooden hoops. Trism says if Lear was serious about leaving a note to take the blame, now's the time. He's shaking so much, it actually takes him 3 attempts to even write it, but it says, "I abducted your craven dragon master and aborted his evil work. He will pay for his offences against lonely travellers. Signed, Lear, son of Elphaba." Trism reads it and he looks up at Lear with a new respect. Lear says he's probably not actually the son of Elphaba, but if no one can prove it, then he might as well claim it. Lear wants to go back to Applepress Farm, but they're too tired to make it that far, so they crouch in the doorway of an inn. The matron comes out and tells them that she only has 2 rooms available, and she's saving the big one because she often has a party that arrives from the Emerald City about an hour after the gates close. They apparently pay government rates, so this gives Trism and Lear the impression that they're probably not people that they want to run into. She says they can have the room above it though. It doesn't have a fireplace, but she can give them extra blankets to keep them warm. She shows them to their room right at the top of the house, and just as they reach the door, they hear horses arriving. She says that'll be the guest she was expecting and leaves the boys to it. The room is tiny and freezing cold. It's basically a storage cupboard with a bed in it. Trism goes off to wash himself, leaving Lear to his thoughts for the first time in ages. He's a bit haunted by the fact that he had to kill all of those dragons, and he's really worried about what Elphaba would have thought about it, but ultimately he's not Elphaba and he thinks he's doing the best he can. He needed to get the broom back so he could help the Conference of Birds and find Nor, although thinking about it, he doesn't even know what Nor looks like anymore. He's actually gone above and beyond for the Conference of Birds. He has literally eliminated the threat. So now they won't need his help anymore, and he's hoping they'll be very grateful. Trism comes back and we're told water slicked down the blonde hairs on his thighs and that his tunic is unbuttoned at the neck and he's wearing it as a nightshirt, so he doesn't have any trousers on. They look out of the windows down at the horses in the courtyard and they see that the horses have the Emperor's sign on them. Trism stands on the windowsill to get a better look, stretches up and his shirt rides up. Lear puts his hand on Trism's bare bum to stop him falling, obviously for no other reason, and then Trism made a sound in his throat. Feel awkward, I'm shy. Lear says they need to stay quiet or the matron will hear them, and maybe even the soldiers too. Trism suggests that they jump out of the window into the river, but Lear says it's too late for that right now, and shuts Trism up by saying, "I'm gonna jump you." At least he's direct. They hardly slept, if you catch my drift, and they try to stay quiet, but apparently without much success. Guys, please, I'm glad you're having a nice time, but your life literally depends on it. Can we please try a bit harder? When Trism has fallen asleep, Lear thinks about what he has learned from his first conscious sexual encounter. He's surprised by how close he could feel to another human being. In the dead of night, they put their clothes back on, steal some food and 2 of the Emperor's horses, and they run. Trism teaches Lear to ride the horse. Not the first thing he's taught him to ride this evening. Sorry, I had to. I'll pipe down. Lear asks if they're going to stick together, and Trism says they seem to be, for now at least. Lear gives directions and leads the way, but he doesn't tell Trism where they're headed. Sister Doctor rushes in to tell Sister Apothecary he's back, not with a girl, but with a young man. They run downstairs to catch a glimpse of the visitor, but they run into Sister Cook heading in the opposite direction. She says that their guests are both absolutely famished and that the Superior Maunt is waiting in her chamber while they eat their third helping of dinner. Well, they have had a lot of exercise recently, so I'm not surprised they're hungry. When the sisters get to the Superior Maunt's chamber, she's praying. They ask if they can see Lear out of professional curiosity. They want to know what caused his injuries and what healed him. The Superior Maunt says she's just as eager to learn all about it, but she's got other responsibilities this morning. She has an appointment with another guest in the chapel, so she tasks them with interviewing Lear and reporting back to her. They run away, so excited to finally have the answers to their questions and to be the first to have the gossip. The Superior Maunt closes her eyes. She's incredibly old now and wonders if it might soon be her turn to die. Winter is here now and she prays for the strength to last just this winter out. She creaks into a standing position and then walks to her appointment. The monastery has been struggling for cash a little bit recently, so she hopes the guest might be here to offer a sizable donation. Any size, really. Sister Doctor tells Lear off for making such a dangerous journey on so little sleep. They've been quite vague about where they've come from or what they've been up to. They definitely haven't mentioned slaying any dragons or anything. They explain to Lear that they bandaged him up and took care of his injuries before Candle took over, but obviously he can't remember any of it. They make sure he knows that without their intervention, he definitely would have died. They ask how on earth Candle did it. And Lear says he doesn't know, but then Mother Yakel emerges from the shadows and says that she bled him and sucked the poison out. She says it takes a daughter of Lalina to draw out the milk only boys can make. Ew. Lalina is a religious figure from a kind of oldie-worldy religion that we don't really need to know about for this one, but she's basically saying that Candle had a prophecy to fulfill. Sister Apothecary is embarrassed by Mother Yakel's gross phrasing, so she jumps in and says she must be losing her mind at her old age. Lear asks if Yakel is the one who directed them to the farm, and Yakel replies that she minds her own business, but if she were Lear, she would make sure that the horses he'd stolen were as far away from the monastery as possible. She literally never answers a question that is targeted at her. But that is pretty sound advice for someone who supposedly doesn't make any sense. The sisters don't really get the answers they want to their questions, but the boys are literally falling asleep, so they lead them to the guest quarters and leave them to rest. Lear lies there with his head full of half memories of all the times he's been there before. All 2 of them. I don't know why I phrased it like that. He was so young when he was here as a child that he can barely remember anything, and he can remember even less of the last time he was here because he was unconscious for the whole time. He tries really hard to remember if there is any way that he might have slept with and impregnated Candle. And he also tries to figure out if he might love her. The whole time, Trism is snoring just a few meters away. Lear walks around examining the place and thinking about how the monastery wouldn't be very securable in a siege. Oh no, why did you say that? There's going to be a siege now. No one in books just casually thinks about whether a place would be securable in a siege unless that's literally about to happen. Lear's paranoia even seeps into his dreams, and even as he sleeps, he's thinking about which wardrobes he could move up against which windows to barricade them in if he needed to. You know, in the event of a siege. He wakes up abruptly at noon. He can smell lunch cooking, and he can also hear horses getting closer. Not a good sign on the siege front. Trism is still asleep, and Lear wants to kiss him to wake him up. He wonders if maybe the time for that is already over, but he does it anyway, and Trism rolls over to make room in the bed for Lear to join him. In the other room, Sister Doctor tells the Superior Maunt that there are soldiers outside looking for 2 men, and apparently one of the men has abducted the other. She says that can't be their guests because they seem way too friendly with each other for that. So to tell the soldiers that they haven't seen the men they're seeking and bid them good day. Sister Doctor says the boys are said to be dangerous and they've killed a load of dragons. But the Superior Maunt says they don't look dangerous, just underfed and undecided about what to do next. Sister Doctor goes away to pass on the message and then comes straight back, saying the soldiers outside are specifically requesting Lear. The Superior Maunt says, well, if one of the boys that they seek is called Lear, then that means the other one isn't called Lear, so just answer with respect to that one and tell them he's not here. Sister Doctor objects, saying that lying is wrong. Boring. But the Superior Maunt defends herself, saying that she's old and muddled and she can blame that if she really wants to, but ultimately she's in charge and Sister Doctor is going to have to do whatever she says. So Sister Doctor goes and she comes back again, this time saying that the soldiers are requesting Lear Throp, the son of Elphaba. The Superior Maunt is getting fed up with her incompetence and says she really needs to get better at thinking for herself. It hasn't been conclusively determined that Lear is definitely Elphaba's son, so she can't say for sure that she has the right person here, and therefore Sister Doctor needs to tell the soldiers they're not here and they need to move on. But Sister Doctor is fed up with the back and forth, so this time she just opens the window and shouts out of it. The soldiers don't back down though, and after a few hours of thudding on the doors, the Superior Maunt has absolutely had enough of the noise, so she opens the window to shout down to the soldiers herself. She tells them it's an inconvenient time to come calling right now because basically all of the Maunt's menstrual cycles have synced up and they're all on their period right now, so they're all in quite a bad mood, so now's just really not a good time. The commander, yes, Commander Cherrystone, shouts back up to her saying that with the authority of the palace, they demand access and that their behaviour proves they must be harbouring criminals. No, she's already told you. Their behaviour is just because they're all on their periods, every single one. The Superior Maunt is so patronising. I love it. She says, matters of authority are perplexing, I agree, but she basically goes on to tell them that the monastery doesn't answer to the Emperor's palace and she doesn't even believe that the Emperor speaks for the unnamed god. The commander asks if they should take her resistance as confirmation that the monastery has been involved in recent treasonous broadsheets which challenge the Emperor's legitimacy. She doesn't respond with her words, but she just makes an uncharacteristic gesture. Commander Cherrystone talks about his history with Lear. Apparently, he suspected that he might have a rebellious side when he knew him as a boy at Kiamo Ko. So he made it his business to make sure that Lear was on the right side with the Emerald City when he helped him get into South Stairs. He remembered him the whole time, even when he pretended not to. He was hoping that Lear might have knowledge of Elphaba or of her missing grimoire. He mentored him in the army, fathered him as best he could, and promoted him in Koya. He thinks that Lear isn't actually fiery enough to really be Elphaba's son, but now he's kidnapped a soldier, caused all the dragons to explode, and destroyed the basilica, and now he needs to be punished. He raises his crossbow, aimed threateningly at the Superior Maunt, but she stays very calm. She tells him to save his breath. They have company he wouldn't want to disturb. She beckons the guest to the window and reveals Lady Glinda. Commander Cherrystone immediately calls off all the soldiers. A little while later, Lear walks into the parlour where Glinda is waiting. She explains that she had been at her country house mourning the loss of her husband, and now that he's dead, she's a very wealthy woman, and she wanted to make a donation to the monastery to help the women in their work. But when she heard the news of the basilica burning to the ground last night, she changed all her plans and came here right away. She wanted to make sure that her donation definitely made it to the monastery before any new political complications might stop it. Lear is just really pleased to see a familiar face, and Glinda says he shouldn't be so surprised to see her here. She knew Elphaba had stayed at this monastery for a while, and that's one of the reasons she likes to support them. She asks him to fill her in on everything that's happened since he went down to South Stairs, and she apologises for not keeping better track of him. They talk about Shell being emperor and the fact that Elphaba would be outraged, particularly at his attempt to become a religious leader for a faith he doesn't even believe in himself. Glinda says that the graffiti littering the Emerald City is right. Elphaba does live. Lear says he doesn't believe in all that. But Glinda says she lives in people's memories and in their values and in their actions. Lear doesn't buy into it, but Glinda actually says that's as much proof as she needs that he's Elphaba's son, because he's just as cynical as she was. By this point, several dozen armed horsemen are setting up camp outside the monastery. They'd broken into their food stores and stolen a load of their supplies, so Lear and Trism ask for an audience with the superior Maunt. They tell her that they can't have the whole house put in so much danger on their behalf. They've been responsible for enough loss of life between them already. They didn't know the dragons would explode, they didn't mean to destroy the basilica, and they don't want to cause any further damage. They're willing to give themselves up. Also, side note, where is their bag of faces? I've literally just remembered that. The superior Maunt asks them to please just wait before giving themselves up. She wants to figure some things out first. She invites everyone in the house, including all the Maunts, all the Quadling girls, Lear, Trism, and Glinda, to attend a service that evening. And when they're all gathered together, she stands up to address them. She tells them they are now experiencing a conflict unlike anything any of them have ever seen before. They need to accept that they are under attack. She's promised to take charge of the monastery and govern it until her death, and she will fulfill that promise. She makes it clear that she has never met the Emperor, nor does she want to, because she thinks he's using the name of the unnamed god to falsely strengthen his own power. He thinks no one can question him if he's acting in the name of the unnamed god. A lot of the Maunts had absolutely no idea any of this was happening. This is literally the first they're hearing of the Emperor or of any unrest in Oz. They're in their own little bubble in the monastery, and they've just never needed to leave. The superior Maunt doesn't feel like she's able to represent the views of everyone in the monastery on her own, nor does she want the responsibility of making decisions alone, which could be life or death for so many people. She pulls up 2 extra chairs, one on either side of her. She would quite happily die for her beliefs, but she can't assume the same for everyone, so this needs to be a group decision. In an ideal world, she would put it to a vote, but because of the imminent threat, she doesn't have time for that, so she'll have to appoint the council herself. So she nominates Sister Doctor to join her, who is so shocked and honoured. Sister Apothecary then sits up in her chair, fully expecting the superior Maunt to say that the 3rd seat is for her, but instead she announces it's for Candle. She says we need the wisdom of the age, the strength of the fit, and the initiative of the young. Great idea and everything, but Candle's like heavily pregnant in an abandoned farm miles away, so she's not really exactly going to be much help in this siege, is she? I think I've said siege more times in this video than I ever have in my life before combined. Glinda stands and tells everyone that even if the army break through the defences, they won't be able to hurt the women all the time she is there. She might be retired from public services herself, but she still has friends in high places, so they wouldn't dare touch her or allow a living witness to such violence. So she's basically their insurance policy. Sister Doctor says that they all need to stay calm because it's not even the Maunts they're actually after, it's just the boys. But the superior Maunt reminds her not to undermine what happens when people are angry and other people get in their way. Lear feels so guilty that he's putting so many innocent people in danger. He doesn't think that the broom will actually carry 2 people, so he suggests that Trism takes it and flies away to safety, and Lear will go and hand himself in to the soldiers and get whatever's coming to him. Sister Doctor is really shocked to find out that the broom actually exists, it's not just a rumour. Mother Yackle jumps in and says, well, of course the rumours are true. She gave Elphaba the broom herself, it came from this monastery. Sister Doctor says that Yackle seems to have some sort of strange connection to Elphaba, and Yackle agrees. She says she seems to have been placed on the sidelines of her life as some sort of witness, and it's phrased as if that's supposed to solve the mystery of Mother Yackle, but like, I'm still confused. Is this a me problem? That's not a sufficient explanation, right? What is going on? They try to send Trism out on the broom, but it won't carry him. Lear wonders if it's lost its power, but as soon as he touches it, it moves in his hands, trying to levitate. Glinda points out that all the guards are actually looking for a pair, so splitting them up would make them more difficult to recognise. She's travelled here alone, which is quite abnormal, so she thinks she might be able to pass Trism off as her bodyguard without raising too much suspicion. She says she's talented talented with a blush brush and she's going to give him a little makeover. So the plan is formed. Lear will leave tonight on the broom, and then tomorrow Glinda will leave with her new bodyguard, Trism. The Maunts can then open their doors and let the guards in, and they can hunt around and realise there is nothing to be found. So eventually they'll be forced to leave them alone and move on. Glinda will wait outside the gate as a really obvious witness to protect the Maunts until those searches have been completed, and then she assumes the soldiers will leave pretty quickly because they'll realise they've been waiting around the monastery for days to find the boys and they're not even there. Lear asks Trism if he can to go to Applepress Farm and rescue Candle. He realises the papers he found about the apostle were actually questioning the Emperor's legitimacy, and now he assumes it must have been his army who attacked and destroyed the machinery before, and he's worried they might return to the same place again. Trism says he'll try and find the farm for Lear, and that he'll take the scraped faces with him so they're not found when the soldiers search the monastery. Oh, there they are. Nobody panic, we've found the scraped faces, everyone. Honestly, with a number of plot holes in this series, I just thought we might never hear of them again. Lear says that the superior Maunt has taught him a lesson he really needed: the importance of following through on your promises. He needs to find the Conference of Birds and tell them they don't need to be worried about the threat of the dragons anymore, and then he really wants to find Nor. Sister Doctor reminds him that Princess Nastoya is still expecting his return too. He's not sure what he can do to help her, but he realises he at least needs to go back and see if he can be a comfort or a friend. 10 years is more than long enough for her to be waiting. Also, now that he knows for sure that neither of the tribes are responsible for the scrapings, he's hoping he might be able to unite them. That's another lesson he's learned from the Maunts. If they all share, they have a much greater chance of survival. Once it's dark outside, Sister Apothecary takes Lear and Trism up to an attic, the highest point of the monastery, where there's a big window. She gives Lear some snacks for the road and wraps Elphaba's cape tightly around him. Inside the cape, he can feel the picture of Nor that had been drawn by his father. And the book says his father, so I assume he has now accepted that. She gives them the privacy to say their goodbyes. The mood is quite somber. They're both very aware that either of them, or even both, could easily be dead within the next few hours. Trism apologises for involving Lear when he came back to the army barracks. He never knew all of this would happen. The pair just stare into each other's eyes for ages. Lear is clearly really upset, and Trism asks if he should really be flying in that condition. But Lear says that loneliness, contempt for corruption, and a permanent state of bereavement is all he's ever known. So this is really no different. They kiss one last time before Lear mounts the broom, which immediately whisks him off into the night. And he doesn't look back. This is actually the first time that Lear's flown since the dragon attack, and the thought of it makes him feel sick, but he just has to get on with it. He's got a job to do. Several jobs, actually. He's a busy man. He thinks he's probably above Applepress Farm right now, and he considers dropping in to check up on Candle, but he doesn't think he can face her after the whole having sex while he was unconscious and had literally never even met her thing, which is totally fair enough. He doesn't hate Candle, and he is worried about her and the baby, but he can't get distracted right now. He needs to get back to the Conference of Birds so he can finish what he started. It takes him a couple of days to get there, but once he reaches the part of the mountains where he found the birds before, his broom starts like bucking underneath him and he can't fly it anymore. It's really windy, so he's not sure if maybe that's why, or whether it's some sort of magical intervention. But either way, he grounds himself. The place where he first met the birds is deserted now, apart from a few feathers and some bird poo littered about, so he has to walk around to try and find where they are. This stretch of mountains is described as a festival of odours, but Gregory Maguire doesn't specify which ones. Oh, please, Gregory, don't spare me the details now. Tell me which odours. Please. Lear is so tired, he literally passes out, and when he wakes up, he thinks he might have actually been asleep for a few days, but he finally feels rested for the first time in ages. Right at the edge of the mountain, he finds the gathering of birds. Their numbers are much smaller than when we last left them, but General Kynot, our Queen Dozy, and lots of the other birds that Lear recognises are still there. General Kynot immediately notices that Lear has his broom back, so he asks him why he didn't come any sooner. excuse me, he's been kind of busy. Lear explains to the birds that he's killed the dragons and that he didn't take any joy from doing it, but they don't need to live in fear anymore. He tells them they need to join forces with the tribes and the other people of Oz to rise up against the Emperor because they're stronger together. He explains that the Emperor has sent people out to find him, but they need to fight back. General Kynot says that humans aren't particularly trustworthy, but he is inclined to believe what Lear is saying, partly because they don't have much choice, and partly because he is Elphaba's son. But Lear says he doesn't want them to trust him just because of who his parents might have been, but he wants them to fly with him because they believe that they should. They take a vote, and Dozy and many others do vote to fly, and they refer to their newfound tribe as Witch Nation. They win the vote, and all 90 of the birds fly up and alongside Lear. They set up a base camp in a nearby field, and after a few days of flying around and practicing, they start to relax. They haven't seen a single dragon, so that threat really does seem to have been eliminated, and their confidence is growing. As they fly, they attract the attention of even more birds, and soon their numbers are in the hundreds. When they're out flying one day, they spot the Skrow encampment down below. Lear isn't ready to see Princess Nastoya yet. Clearly making her wait 10 years actually isn't quite enough for him. So General Kynot takes one for the team, and he flies down to make contact with them. Princess Nastoya, despite being almost completely blind, has spotted Lear in the sky. The cape has given him away, and it's also kind of hard to miss 400 birds flying overhead, so it was bound to draw some attention. Kynot tells them that the dragons are dead, so they need to all make friends together so that they can unite against the Emperor. When he returns to the formation, he tells Lear that Princess Nastoya really wants to see him, and that she has something she needs to tell him, no matter whether he can help her or not. Lear thinks to himself that he'll go once he's helped the birds, but to keep her happy, he tells Kynot to invite them to visit him at Apple Press Farm whenever they like. So the birds and Lear carry on flying against some particularly strong winds known as the farts of Cumbretia. Lovely. And they keep flying for days and days, but it's quite a tough journey and they're struggling for energy. Lear spots Kiamo Ko down below, and he doesn't particularly want to go back there, but he knows the birds need to stop at some point, and it might as well be somewhere he knows. He lands in the courtyard with over 200 small birds while the others wait outside the gates for an invitation. Chistery had seen them flying around in the sky, not sure how because he's still got no eyes. He says a couple of times he even mistook Lear for Elphaba on her broom. He'd love to join them, but he's old now and his wings aren't up to such a challenge. Lear asks if he and the birds can stay for a while, and Chistery seems actually almost offended that Lear even felt he had to ask. He says that until someone else comes to claim it, Kiamo Ko belongs to Lear, and he should treat it as his home. Lear goes upstairs to see Nanny, who's pleased to have a visitor, but she has no idea who he is. She has saved the birds the crusts from her lunch though, because she saw them coming, which is so cute. And also the thought of her trying to feed like thousands of birds with a few sandwich crusts is really sad and cute. Lear asks Nanny if she's ever heard of Yakel, and Nanny tells him that she has met someone by that name once. She'd been an old crone at the time, running a little business selling remedies in the Emerald City. Nanny had bought a potion off her for Elphaba's mother to drink to ensure that Nessa Rose wasn't born green like her sister. Apparently Yakel told Nanny that Elphaba would make history. Okay, brilliant. We actually already know that story from the first book, so no further answers there then. It takes them 2 more weeks to reach the Emerald City, and by that time the Conference of Birds was made up of over 6,000. Lear has no intention of attacking the Emerald City or seeing Shell or Glinda or anyone else. He just wants them to be seen and to prove a point. It's rush hour and the streets are really busy with people heading out to work or out for the evening. The birds and Lear swoop in from the west, flying in perfect formation in the shape of the Wicked Witch. Hat, cape, skirt, broom, everything. Their shape is absolutely unmistakable, and their message is clear. Elphaba lives. Once the display is finished, the birds all swoop down and land back at their base. Lear addresses the conference and asks them all to please look out for Nor. He shows them Fiero's drawing of her that he's been carrying around, and he tells them that she's older now, obviously, but he really thinks that if anyone has a chance of finding her, It's the birds, because they see everything. General Kynot takes the floor and tells the birds that their mission for now is over, but they mustn't forget the lesson they've learned. They need to work together. He then disbands the conference and flies away. Lear mounts his broom and flies too, but he's followed by a beautiful grey goose. He's so stunning that the book says he made Lear feel like a chimney sweep who hasn't seen a bath for a month. His name is Iskanari, and they fly together for a while, avoiding going anywhere near the monastery because Lear is so worried about what he might see. They stop to rest, and a fox jumps out of nowhere and attacks Iskanari. His wing is injured, and it's not too deep, but he can't fly anymore. So the pair walk together on foot instead. Lear complains a bit that Iskanari is so slow, but ultimately he doesn't really mind that the journey takes a bit longer. He's had a lot going on, so he kind of welcomes the chance to process it all. How many times do I have to say this? Can someone get this boy some therapy? He realizes that he's actually achieved something now with the dragon murders, even though he does feel quite bad about it. Hey, what about all those people you murdered? Do you feel bad about them as well? Maybe? Oh, who said that? Anyway, he wonders how this newfound sense of accomplishment might impact his relationship with Candle. He knows more about human warmth now too, and he quite excitedly wonders how that might impact his relationship with Candle. Oh, okay, we're just gonna forget everything that happened now, are we? That's fine. It takes them a few weeks to get back to the farm, by which point Iskanari's wing is mostly healed. Lear can't really work out what Iskanari intends to do once they get there, but he says he can't really see domestic life being very fulfilling for him. Iskanari doesn't really seem to take the hint, so Lear says he wants to make it very clear he's not inviting him to come and live with them. Fuck off, Elaine! 10 points for communication and everything, but it just does sound a bit harsh. He does say there are no hard feelings though, so that's fine, isn't it? Iskanari says that he follows his own instincts, which were telling him to go his own way anyway. And Lear asks if he's so good with instincts, could he tell Lear anything about his own instincts? Iskanari says that he's not untalented and he's actually quite smart for a human. He also says that he has a talent for reading the past, which confuses Lear, obviously, because that's a confusing thing to say. So he continues. Apparently, it's not just about being able to remember the past, but it's about being able to take new strength and information from it and learn from it. I'm still confused. Is this supposed to be some sort of special skill? It sounds to me like just having a working memory and hindsight. Anyway, as they get closer to Apple Press Farm, they can see about 10 tents in the meadow next door. Clearly Lear's offhand invitation to Princess Nastoya has been accepted. Candle seems surprised and flustered by Lear's arrival. She's so heavily pregnant she can't move very quickly. He approaches her cautiously and takes her hand. He's hoping that the physical contact might help him work out how he feels about her, but it's no help whatsoever. He doesn't really feel anything. She says, welcome home, but she seems quite shy and quiet. He asks if Trism had come to visit her, and she says that he had, but she didn't know whether to trust him because he seemed like a soldier. She's a bit annoyed that he's asked about Trism before he's even asked if she's okay, but Lear's defense to that is that he can see she's alive. He wasn't sure if Trism was, which I do see the logic in. But she's literally pregnant with your baby. Candle then asks Lear about the Scrow tribe that she's been hosting for the last week. She's so glad he's back because she can't figure out what they want and she's been doing all their washing and she's nearly run out of food. He also introduces Candle to Iskanari, but he doesn't really know quite how to refer to him because friend doesn't seem quite right. And then Iskanari says that he's his familiar, which Lear actually takes offense to because he's not a witch. He asks Candle about Trism again. Boy, read the room. And she says that he arrived unharmed, but he couldn't stay. Lear asks why not, but she completely ignores the question. She says that her and Trism had struggled to communicate because Trism doesn't speak any Kwaati, which is her first language, so she could understand some of what Trism was saying in his own language, but she couldn't really speak back. She seems upset, or reserved at least, and Lear wonders whether maybe she can tell that he loves Trism, and that maybe Trism loves him as well, and that maybe he loves Candle as well, and maybe she loves him as well. He doesn't even really know what love is, but he is really worried that he might have upset Candle. He tells her that he has come back to Apple Press Farm to be with her, and he gets upset because she's being quite cold and difficult. He says he's been trying his best to do what she told him to go out into the world and learn where he wants to be, and he knows where he wants to be. He wants to be here with her. Candle tells Lear to go and help the beast, meaning Princess Nastoya, and Lear tells Candle off because that's, you know, rude. And Candle does apologise. She didn't really mean it like that, but basically she's been really struggling with this pregnancy and she's feeling really out of sorts. She's just not herself at the moment. She also tells him that Trism had left him something and that he'd strung it up by the ceiling in the barn to keep it away from the mice because the mice seem really interested in it. I wonder what that could be. Nothing horrifying, I hope. So he goes into the barn to find Trism's parcels, and he sees it as a kind of proof of life that Glinda's plan to sneak Trism past the guards definitely worked. So he feels an overwhelming sense of relief. He wonders if Trism had maybe seen Candle's pregnant state, assume it was Lear's baby, and maybe he got upset. He's still obviously very confused, but he does know that the love from Candle and from Trism had both strengthened him in their own ways. So he pulls down the parcels and opens them to reveal the hoops of face. Is that really the phrase we're going with? Could he really not think of anything better to describe that? Hoops of face? Really? Okay, we'll go with that then. Iskanari has followed Lear into the barn and he is not really fazed by the hoops of face, but he is really angry that Lear is in there looking through his mail when there is like an alive, suffering woman outside waiting for his help. Valid point from Iskanari. They can hear the Domingan playing in the distance. And Iskanari says, she's really good. And he should know because he's got perfect pitch, which is really unusual in a goose. Brag. Lear tells him that she can even get the lowercase a animals singing. And Iskanari says that singing helps to lighten the load, which gives Lear an idea. He grabs the bag of hoops of face and leaves the barn. Surely not. Please tell me we're not about to have a choir of dismembered faces save the day. That's all I ask. So he takes the faces into the orchard and hangs them up on the branches of an apple tree at about head height. There is loads of laundry hanging out to dry too, which apparently fluttered like liquid limbs. Gorgeous. Lear approaches Candle and asks her to come outside and bring the Domingan. Not for him, but for Princess Nastoya. She's exhausted and she's a bit worried that something might actually be wrong with the baby, but she doesn't have anyone to ask. She tells him that Trism had actually tried to convince her to leave with him, saying it was for her safety, but she hadn't known whether or not to trust him. She said, I didn't know if he was trying to kill me and my child. But all Lear hears is that she's referring to the baby as mine rather than ours, and he's really hurt by that. He says in a small voice, and he didn't stay. But Candle says no. Generally, people don't. The Scrow people carry their princess into the orchard. Her state has deteriorated even further and she's barely even conscious now. She seems to be in absolutely excruciating pain, and Lear feels quite guilty for abandoning her for so long, as he should. She can't even speak her message to him. He's left it too late. Shem Otakos tries to give her some water, but she can't even drink. She is literally on death's door, and she's just so desperate for Lear's help. Apparently the way she's laying is giving her chin some prominence for perhaps the first time in a decade. Is now really the time to be making fun of her double chin? Have some respect. Candle struggles to get the Domingan actually close enough to her for her to be able to play it because she's so pregnant, but she just about manages it. Lear puts his hand on her shoulder to try and comfort her, but she just shrugs it off. She says she's in a lot of pain and she doesn't know how long she can keep playing for. Iskanari, wrong way around. Iskanari suggests that Lear should maybe concentrate on the past. He doesn't know enough, oh, she's lost her Domingan, about Princess Nastoya's life to focus on her, but he suggests that Lear thinks about the others. He says, even in death, we are a society, after all.
We live in a society.
Lovely message and everything, but what? Then Lear has a revelation and suddenly understands what Iskanari means. And it is exactly what we've all been hoping it's not going to be. There is only so much living humans could do, but maybe the human dead were better equipped to pull off Princess Nastoya's disguise. Oh, absolutely. Why did I not think of that before? Ghosts! And it happens, guys. The Hoops of Face choir. That's what this whole thing has been leading up to. I'm gonna have a breakdown. So the faces start to sing sentences about their life. Things like, I was the fourth of 5 siblings and I loved the way the sun warmed stone. And I once took off all my clothes and rolled around in a field of fern. Okay, Theresa May.
I have to confess, when me and my friends sort of used to run through the fields of wheat.
And I loved how milk tastes. This just made me think, like, what on earth would mine be? I once spent 3 consecutive days playing with finger puppets in my dad's garage. This does feel like a bit of a life-defining moment, to be honest. There is no coming back from here. Anyway, Lear hears from each hoop individually. Each one sings a little solo alongside candles playing. And I do have to ask, if he didn't know enough about Princess Nastoya's life to be able to think about her past, how did he manage to pull it off by thinking about the pasts of people he never even met when they were alive? But once again, we don't question it. The book says, reminded of human life, the corporeal part of Princess Nastoya melted in the snow. Right, well that was easy then. There's only an elephant left on the blanket now, no trace of a woman. Her eyes open slowly and lock onto Liz for a second, and then her neck snaps, which is just a bit violent. Shem Otakos gestures a surgeon forward. Of course, there's a surgeon here who was never mentioned before. She makes a sort of sculpture by cutting off one of Princess Nastoya's tasks, cutting off like a disc at the wide end, which is hollow, and then slotting it over the like tapered end. She hands it to Shem Otakos and he bows and accepts it, presumably turning him into the Scrow's next leader, and he says that he will lead in memory of Princess Nastoya. The tribe then load the elephant body onto a cart and begin the trudge back to their homeland, where they will burn her body and the scraped faces with her. Thank God, stop them from being able to burst into song again. That is absolutely horrifying. The book says that Nastoya had never smelled very fine while alive, and now she was a health hazard as well. Jesus Christ, knock an elephant woman while she's down. Otakos insists that Lear follows them most of the way back in case they come across the Unamata tribe. He says that Lear's last duty to Princess Nastoya is to make sure that her bones reach home safely, and he obliges. He asks Iskinari to stay and look after Candle. She holds his hands, but she won't meet his eyes. The Unamata actually did show up during the Scrow's journey, but they want peace. They sing a funeral song for the princess and then disappear back into the mountains. At the end of the journey, Lear says his goodbyes and returns home with a heavy heart. On his way back, he searches for meaning once again. He's really glad he was finally able to help Princess Nastoya and that she managed to get her dying wish of returning to her elephant form. He's glad that he probably saved more people whose faces would have been scraped off by the dragons. He's hoping that maybe that might counteract some of the deaths he caused at Bengda. Oh my God, finally some accountability. It only took 3 hours. But now he starts maybe overthinking. There are still prisoners in South Stairs and still soldiers in barracks and still poor people suffering. Lear is suddenly so aware of the fact that he can't help everyone. There will always be suffering. The Conference of Birds put on a great show, but did it really achieve anything? It might have even given the Emperor leverage to fund more weapons or recruit more soldiers. Everything just feels quite pointless to him now. He thinks about the colossal might of wickedness, how we love to locate it massively elsewhere, but so much of it comes down to what each one of us does between breakfast and bedtime.
Beyonce has the same 24 hours in a day that we do.
He desperately wishes that Princess Nastoya had been able to tell him her message about Noor. He wonders if she'd actually found out where she is, and also if he would ever see her again. Suddenly, something shifts into place, and he realises that the Elphaba Lives graffiti that had felt so similar to him the first time he'd seen it was in Noor's handwriting. When he reaches Apple Press Farm a week later, he immediately knows it's deserted. Iskanari, the hens, the donkey, even Candle, they're all gone. He panics, as you would, not knowing if she left willingly or if maybe the soldiers came after her. But inside he sees that her Domingan is gone and that his broom is sat on the mantelpiece completely unharmed. He hears a goat which apparently really needs milking. I'm not a farmer, so I don't know if that's a thing, but it sounds fake. He pulls the goat over to a corner of the room near the printing press so he can milk it, and he nearly trips over the witch's cape in the corner with the rubbish. So he picks it up and the lump of dead matter rolled off the hem and into the corner. Okay, he's piecing together a story now. The baby had come early and it was either dead on arrival or not long after, and Candle was all alone apart from the goose. He really regrets agreeing to follow the scroll now. He picks up the child, holds it at a distance and cries. And it's not too cold, so he thinks all of this must have happened really recently. He wonders if maybe the scraped faces might have sung the fetus to death at the same time as Princess Nastoya, which is it's just so horrible. It's an absolutely horrendous sentence. He holds the baby up against his neck and he feels its mouth move. Suddenly he thinks he can maybe feel some warmth coming from it. So he takes it to the light for a bit of a better look. It's a girl. She twitches and cries and stretches, and he drips goat milk into her mouth. He sits with the baby all night, and when the sun comes up, it begins to rain. I'm going to read from the book one last time. Still smeared with her birth blood and the watery beginning of her little feces, he took her to the doorway and held her up in the warm rain. She cleaned up green. And that is the end of the book. But I've still got so many questions. Where's Candle? Who's printing the papers? Where the fuck is Nor? What's going on with Iskanari? He kind of felt like he came out of nowhere right towards the end of the story and didn't really add anything. So I'm confused. Is that just supposed to be telling us that Elphaba is a witch because he's... No, Elphaba's not in this. That Lear is a witch because he's got a familiar? What is Shell going to do next as the Emperor? So... crucially, I think this book was published after the musical was already written and had become quite popular. So I was a bit worried when I started it that it was going to be like fan service for the musical, basically, because the book is actually dedicated to the team who created the musical. But I think we can safely say there is no fan service involved here. In fact, we barely even see any of the musical characters apart from Glinda. However, I do have one main question, and that is that why the major, turning point, the saving the day moment was about singing? It's the only reason I can think of. And even then, I really feel like it's quite a stretch. My main takeaway from this is that I still have no idea what the magic involves in this world. There isn't a single character where I could define to you their, magical powers. Even Elphaba. In the first book, she flew and she turned some water to ice. And then the rest of it, she kind of got all out of the Grimmery. But so I never really felt like I could tell what the capabilities of her powers were. And I now feel like that about Lear as well. Particularly because the power that Iskanari told us he has of being able to see the past is literally just memory. And when I've been going back through the script to film this video, I see that there are several moments where pieces of information all slot together and drop into place for Lear, but that to me doesn't really feel like a special power. That just feels like he can't possibly have all the information at once, so things have to make sense in hindsight rather than at the time. The graffiti being in Nor's handwriting, that kind of weighs on his mind for a while. He pays a lot of attention to that graffiti, and even the first time he saw it, he said it felt familiar. The fact that he's suddenly something jogged his memory and then he remembered Nor's handwriting, I don't know, that doesn't feel like a special power to me. If it does, maybe I've got that power as well. And I suppose the other argument is that obviously that whole time he was unconscious, he was sort of having visions of the past. All of that stuff when he was with Dorothy and in the Emerald City and in Southstairs, they were all flashbacks. But I very much got the impression that that was something the Domingan was doing, not something that Lear's magic powers were doing. Because he could hear that music throughout, couldn't he? There is one point where he said the music had stopped for the first time since being down in Southstairs, and because of the cutting between the timelines, we know that that is the point in time where Candle had stopped playing the Domingan for the first time because she was busy giving him a non-consensual adult cuddle, so her fingers were a bit busy. What did bring him back to life? Does Candle have magic powers? Honestly, I'm so confused. I feel like I've got more questions at the end of this book than I had at the beginning, and I had a lot to begin with. At the end of the audiobook, and I will put my Audible link in the description here as well, just in case any of you are keen to hear the full story yourself, or any other audiobooks. I love an audiobook. But there's an interview with Gregory Maguire right at the end of the audiobook, and he says in that interview he likes to leave loose strings in this series because Wicked is a tragedy, in that the witch dies, and he wants to make a point about how if someone dies in midlife, it's not like when someone dies in old age. It is unexpected, and there are things left open and not tied up with a neat little bow. And I understand that concept. There are just too many plot holes for that to completely rid him of all blame for me. Are they plot holes or are they just things we haven't come back to yet? That really is the question, isn't it? Now, there are 3 more books in this series. I don't know if I'm going to read them because these videos, they really do take a long time to put together. I can't even express to you. This took over my life for the last probably 6 weeks, and I was doing it sort of casually for months before that too. However, if both the previous video and this video get 100,000 views, then maybe I will. But if I do, it will be on this YouTube channel, not on my old one, because I've got a house renovation to do and a trip to Florida that I'm going on in 4 hours. So if I do ever carry on this series, and let me know if you would want me to, because I am open to requests, it will be here. So make sure you're subscribed here if you would like to see that. Thank you for spending the last 3.5 hours with me. I'm so sorry that it took so long, but the story is so convoluted and there are so many bits where, like, for example, Shell not being religious doesn't feel relevant at the time, but it is relevant later. It took me a long time to work this script into what it is, and I hope that I've done a good job of it. I hope you're excited for part 2 of the movie. I definitely am, and I hope it lives up to the first one and more. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you back on this channel very soon. Bye guys!